And joining us now is Michael McFaul, former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, and Anja Manuel, the Executive Director of the Aspen Strategy Group. She is a former diplomat, author, and advisor on foreign policy. So, Ambassador McFaul, first to you. The message to Vladimir Putin that has to emerge from here. You've got Viktor Orban in Beijing, having just been in Moscow, and, Modi in Moscow. So he's getting a lot of support, tangible support from China, obviously, and rhetorical support from a NATO member, Hungary's leader.
Yeah. Well, that trip in particular was very disappointing to me. I wonder if Mr. Orban should think about leaving the NATO alliance, right, if he's so enamored with Vladimir Putin. But you're right. The NATO summit has to respond collectively to what Putin did yesterday, this barbaric attack on children with cancer. How more cruel can you be? And I think it has to be more than just a rhetorical response. I think there has to be new commitments, especially air defense systems. That's what the Ukrainians need. They need more air defense systems, more Patriot systems to defend their hospitals. And I hope we'll be hearing more about that in the coming days.
And what we're hearing from the American military is that they don't have supplies. They're scouring the world to get, a launcher from here and a battery from there and putting it together, and even taking some from Israel.
Yeah, I think this has been one of the biggest surprises of this war.
The supply chain
and industrial production. That's why I think at the summit tomorrow, if anybody's listening, there's a lot of other news going on in your town here, Andrea, I've noticed since arriving today. But if anybody's listening, I think this will be one of the signature events of this summit, where they're going to actually collectively coordinate industrial military production, including co-production from time to time.
So, Anja, the allies are in final negotiations over language around Ukraine's eventual admission. There's been a lot of controversy. There was in Vilnius at their last big meeting. There are conditions for membership. Is NATO going to give some sort of an irreversible commitment to Ukraine, a time frame?
Yeah, Andrea, thanks for having me. And hi, Mike. Nice to see you on here. I hope they do. But the language, I believe, matters less than the actions that NATO has already taken. For all intents and purposes, NATO is united in supporting Ukraine. And to add on to what Mike just said, I think one of the most important things that's going to come out of this summit is that there's going to be a new command in Wiesbaden, Germany, that's going to handle all of the supply chain into getting those weapons to Ukraine that are so critical for Ukraine's defense. This is really important because it proofs the alliance and what it's doing for Ukraine in a way from all of the politics, the elections we're seeing in France, in the UK, in the US, and moves that out of the hands of what's been a US military operation and makes it really a NATO operation based out of Germany.
And Mike McFaul, there's also the Trump proofing.
Yes.
As though one could, but there's so much nervousness among NATO leaders who know how dismissive he was of NATO and dismissive of European commitments, which have been considerable.
Rightfully so. He said some very threatening things about NATO, and not just when he was president. Just a few months ago, he said, if you don't pay up, as if that's a protection racket, the Russians can do, and I'm quoting or paraphrasing, whatever the hell they want. That's not a word I normally use with you, Andrea. Right. That's what he said. I think the good news, if Mr. Trump is listening to the summit, is that 23 countries now are making the 2% GDP spending. He talked about that for years and years. They're now doing exactly what he wants. Maybe that's part of the Trump proofing. The NATO is actually doing the burden sharing that he talked about.
And a lot of the Scandinavian countries are doing a lot more than the U.S. Anja, briefly, what about China? China's watching this. NATO is watching China. They're concerned about China's engagement with Putin.
That's right. Good point, Andrea. On the China-Russia axis is something to watch. And as much as China is out there with their, quote, 6-point peace plan, that's a peace plan mostly on Russia's terms. And behind the scenes, as you've reported and others have, China is supplying a huge amount of dual-use equipment to the Russians to continue their brutal assault on Ukraine. So I don't think you can take these peace overtures by China very seriously. I do hope that at some point, as this war draws to a close, China will play a more constructive role, but we don't see that happening yet.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.